Radio podcast by Film Explore.
Mesh Festival for Kunst UND Technology.
Radio podcast by Film Explore.
Film Explore. Welcome to Film Explorer podcast series extended. We are here in the Mesh Festival. My name is Giuseppe Salvatore, editor of Film Explorer. It's a pleasure to have here to meet today two co-director and co-producer of the film Don't Forget the Mountain. They are Linda Zhang and Meng Li. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So, Linda, you come from Toronto, from Canada, and you, Meng, come from Zurich, actually, not so far from here.
Yes.
And also your film, in a sense, speak or is a connection of the perspective that is a global perspective. We could imagine from Canada or from everywhere about something very specific that is a mine in Switzerland. But at the same time, you speak a very general topic. So how did you come before speaking about in general about also the Mesh Festival and what interested you in here? How was the origin of this project? How do you meet because of this project, or how is your approach to the mine?
So Studio Pararaum already started a few years ago, and Linda, Zhang, and me met already like more than 10 years, and then we've been working together. And the project itself started actually long before we were doing the film. So we started actually even before COVID. We were like confined at home, and then Linda was saying, I really want to cast something. Then I was like, okay, let's dig something. So we dig a hole and then we start to cast in the hole. And then because we are both architects, so we have like architectural background. Initially, we wanted to make a project or like even before the film about the city. Then we started to think about the city and then walk around the city. That's where we live. But then we started to think about where the city is coming from. The city are built from the materials are mined from the mountain. So we went to the mountain and then we didn't really find the city there, but then we find the void of the city. So the mountain is still there, but when you go inside, it started to hollowed out by taking materials to build our cities. So that's how the whole project started.
And I think this is happening during the pandemic when we were all very disembodied in many ways and disconnected from our environments. And so I think there was this heightened sense of a disconnection between, what are the things that are around us and where they actually come from, and things that are part of us and things that we don't have access to, in many senses, not just material senses, but also in our communities at that time. So the project, I think, also shares this desire of kind of reestablishing a kind of like bodily sensation or an affect and a kind of connection and memory to the kind of reciprocal landscapes, as Jane Manhattan would call them, of how they kind of link across place and time.
So making visible is sort of leading idea about this project, because you make visible what is invisible in the city. Digging or going to the mine in order to explore this territory as integrative part of the city. And but why film? So why you choose the film as a form, as a media, in order to make visible the mine? Could be also an object, could be also a piece of mine, I don't know, a piece of a gypsum.
It's interesting because this is actually now the second short documentary film that I've done, and both projects did not start as film projects. So I think as architects, it's very natural to start with physical things. We actually began with casts. We began with basically taking record. And in architecture, there's kind of two classic traditions of how you do this. The classic tradition is to take a plaster cast. If you think of the Victoria and Albert Museum and the plaster cast rooms, this is how you would be able to take something from somewhere else and be able to show it elsewhere before we had photography, before we had 3D scans. We then also did a series with a photographer based in Quebec, Felix. And then we also did a series of LiDAR scans, so 3D scans that would basically capture the surface. That was kind of the start of the project. And then taking these to kind of create new objects that would kind of bring out the presence of the void. And so it actually began as objects, as materials. But there is a kind of I think the objects are very alluring and they draw you in a lot, but they also, you're left with a lot of questions about it and maybe not quite the way to lead you into them. But like an exhibition didactic that's like, this means this and this means this, would also kind of like kill any of the meaning or kind of the relationality that could exist from the objects. So I think the film started as a way to try to kind of tell the story of these objects, and these objects are like solid casts of these caverns. So we think of each of these objects as like a character; they have characterhood, and so the film is kind of able to like tell the story of these characters in a way, and they appear in the film. So that there's the three caverns that are the LiDAR scans that you move through. In each of the cavern is one of the casts, and in that very ending scene in the mountain, we like brought the physical casts to the mountain and filmed them on 35mm film in the mountain. And so the film is very much then about the casts in a way.
I like with the film this aspect of, I could say, the materiality of absence. I mean, the absence becomes very material, paradoxically in a sense, because film is a matter of imagination, but at the same time, from the point of view experience, not from the point of view of objects or of things being there, in a sense, is more material than probably what could be experienced through an object. And I don't know if probably even the choice of the 60mm that, in a sense, is not. It's something complementary, I would say, with all the rest we are going to see here in the Mesh Festival. They are very, very based on digital animation, computer generated images. So this is a sort of other. At the same time, it's perfectly integrated with animation, because in the end, the film works also with the computer animation. If I
Yes.
yeah, so about the choice of the texture of the film and the combination of the digital and the analog, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much the core of the models of operatives of Studio Pararaum, that we interweave the analog and the digital, the material and the immaterial. As you said, actually the choice of making a film. The film is not a standalone project. Even today, when we were looking at the film, we thought, okay, the film actually really needs other parts of the whole project. So we see the film, as you said, a material is part of the material. For example, the fine-tuned AI model with it, the cast with it, and then the photographies, and then even before that, the kind of the physical molding of the mining texture. So they are all part of this kind of iterative processes, weaving together different kind of techniques and tools, but also means to find a new way of imagining our world, and then to come up with new things, because we are very much like experimenting, that we don't want to follow the conventional ways of using the technique and the material and the tools. So the same as you mentioned, the 16mm, actually the film was first filmed in 35mm in the original mine, because we wanted to capture, because it's so dark. And then we talked with our collaborator, Christian Flame, that he was saying, with 16mm in this total darkness, you almost can't capture anything. So we went with 35 with color. But then that during this kind of a digital transformation, we also want to have traces, that to have like visible traces that is not just like feels like digital. So we also chose to use 16mm to basically make the material, to make the film more materialized.
And I think another part of it is kind of playing on the idea of what we believe is real, which is very much like a feeling. Like, how does that hit you in the chest? So the animations we did in Unreal Engine from like LiDAR scans, and when they come out very crisp and digital, you very much don't believe them in a certain way. And so we just literally took them, put them onto 16 millimeter film. We did some analog manipulations, but just the act of taking what is from Unreal and putting it onto a film, and today we screened a digital scan, but when you have a 16 millimeter projector, it feels very different. There's a kind of truth factor that kind of plays into that. You feel like you're there, even though what you're seeing on screen is point clouds. It couldn't possibly be real. And I think that's something we're quite interested in, like what are our emotional associations to some of our memory technologies, and then kind of challenging some of those so that it's maybe working not in the kind of counterintuitive ways.
Anyway, the continuity between the two techniques or the two media is very clear, is very strong and very effective in your film. And actually, in another discussion today, one of the keyword was indeterminacy, and in a way, it's paradoxical because we are speaking about digital art and things that are perceived, at least, are very precise, very all is calculated, etc. But at the same time, what we discover here also with the interface between digital technology and biology, for example, or physical perception and the question of the body, that's very present, and it's something that probably is speaking exactly about this new media, so to say. Probably a question about exactly the question of media, because I don't know, you're not necessarily a theoretician about this, but you come from architecture and you work with film, so I mean it's something that speaks to you, and it also something that speaks with the question of new, in the sense that I have the impression that from one side we are still in a moment of exploration of this new media like artificial intelligence, etc. At the same time, we are already in a moment where we can think this as tool in order to do something, so just as an instrument. So how do you feel you learn a lot from technology? At the same time, what is your approach now? What do you consider, for example, the film, what is a film like 60 minutes or analog or not, more as a media or as a tool, I will say? I don't know.
I think that you mentioned, like, with this, when we think about technological tools, we always think about innovations. We need to do something new. And then this new that for us is not just like we invent, like in the air, but as we were describing how we think of our film, that we are seeing ourselves as like digger. So we actually just like dig around that we don't have like a defined kind of goal. We don't know where we're going. Well, I mean, we know vaguely where we're going, but then we don't know the final destinations, and then we don't know what we will find. So basically, we're using these different tools to dig out what is like the layers of the earth, and then what has been buried there, and then the same as like searching back what has been lost, but find something that has never been existed.
And I think in a lot of our conversations with Peter Seeley, who's an architectural historian of 19th century photography, but also film, Peter looks a lot at kind of how society reacted to technologies as they emerged. And if we look at 19th century photography and how it enters the legal system and like people's disbelief that like it was not taken as factual or true. People thought that they were fabricated, these kind of mystical things at the time. And so I think there's a lot of parallels to the kind of AI generated imagery that's coming out now. So I think it's always also kind of engaging with like how are these technologies challenging some of our assumptions of how we see, but also how are maybe we not seeing the kind of like water that we're in or the air that we're breathing. And I kind of a reoccurring kind of core value in our work is always around this idea that technology isn't technology can't lie, but it also can't tell the truth, right? It's not actually capable of doing either or. It is who's using it for what purpose to what means. And so I think there's always an interest, especially as like artists or designers or architects, to like whatever is emerging as technology. As researchers, we both have access to a lot of technology, which is a privilege. And I think there's a responsibility to be exploring it from a non kind of like capitalistic neoliberalist point of view, and to kind of think about what are some of its uses and maybe challenge why we're using them or who are we accountable to.
Just to finish, I know that you have at the same time right now an exhibition also in Canada with the same theme, the same project, and then of course you could work with a multimediality because we have objects and also the film, etc. So, how is now the experience there with this exhibition situation and now with the projection in a theater?
I mean, I'm curious what your reaction was. My immediate reaction was like, oh, this, I was very curious how today would go. It's the first time for me that I've seen the film without the pieces or without the rest of the exhibition. And I definitely felt a little bit of like lament or kind of like I kind of missed the larger sculptural works in relation to it. But I'm still kind of processing if that's just because I'm so habitually accustomed to them kind of being linked together. The show in Canada is at the Visual Arts Centre of Clarington. It's on through December 15th. And it's across 2 different floors of the whole center. And there is, when you first come in, a large room that is all AI generated sculptural works, some of which are the size of me. They're all in clay. And then upstairs is the cave, and it is a kind of like mix of hybrid AI and 3D scan work together. But I'm curious how that landed for you, seeing the film the first time without the exhibition and the sculptural pieces.
Yeah, I would say maybe even a bigger context that our site in Canada is kind of remote. So it's like it's not in the center of Toronto. You need to drive out. It's like kind of this kind of isolated like historical factory, and then you go in. It's just like this world. So there we tried to create the whole world somehow in this kind of out of the city. And here in Basel, it's a different context. You are in a bigger festival. You are in the urban center. You are surrounded people who are actually already very have a lot of knowledge of like art technology, and there is like the audience is very different. So also our film was shown in a curated cluster by the curators, and then in relation with like other pieces. So it's a very different context. I wonder that in this context, I perceive the film differently also because like in combination or in relation to other pieces are showing or the bigger environment, but also with the conversation how people here understood the film or the whole area, and then in comparison to what is kind of a totally different way of perceiving the film in the darkness in the other world. So I think it's maybe also questioning the format of the film as it has a narrative, but not as a featured kind of drama, very clear. So I guess there's like ambiguities. What is the capacity of such film format? How clear is the message can transmit it to the audience?
Yeah, probably one keyword more that are popping out now is resonance, because in a sense the film in exhibition in Toronto resonates with the objects, with the other things of course yourself created, but at the same time here there is also probably a bigger resonance in the sense, even because despite the very different approach, the very different technology, the very different media that are used in the Mesh Festival, commonality, that was another keyword today popping up, something common is there, even probably thanks to the curation of the festival. At the same time, yeah, I can imagine that this film is resonating with other films, with other works, and probably something more even more enriching for you. I don't know, what is your feedback, just to finish, about this festival? How do you feel it?
Yeah, I think we were both quite like
Overwhelmed.
quite pleasantly surprised. And like I guess I think it exceeded our expectation in many ways. The scale and scope of like the programming, just the amount of folks that were like brought together, but also the kind of curation of how different themes were arranged within the work and the breadth of those and the kinds of like different like actually looking critically at a lot of these technologies. And you're bringing like I don't know, I think in a lot of these kinds of spaces you often have folks who are maybe very like technically competent but don't have the critical thinking or don't have an artistic background. And then in other spaces you'll have like artists who have very rudimentary, computational skills. And so I think it's actually really rare, the kind of unique sets of like artists that were able to be brought together at Mesh Festival that kind of really speak across these backgrounds, but then all from different social locations. So each of them bringing in also like a different perspective of like why they're doing this work and who are we accountable to and what this work could be useful to as we kind of like are in the society that we're in right now, in the world that we're in right now. Yeah. How about you?
I felt really the environment or the festival is very friendly, which makes me feel good because technology quite often that people think, oh, it's a gig, like it's kind of a closed door. It's like it's not accessible. So I really appreciate the accessibility of the festival. You come in and also a lot of like languages we use, even the workshops, then imageries. Most of them are very presented in a way that is not intimidating. So you go there, you can start to understand, okay, technology can combine with art and together happen in a very fluid space. So like a lot of kind of very informal, like accidental things you just bump into. You ask, hey, is it technology or is it art? Or like just like as us, we are sitting here and talking, people can just like pop in their like earphones and then start to hear this conversation. So I really appreciate the accessibility and then the fluidity of the festival.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monk. Thank you very much, Linda. We let resonate also our discussion here in the hall of the Mesh Festival, and we'll continue to discover other artworks and to discuss with other people. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Mesh Festival.
Radio podcast by Finiscore.
Mesh Festival for Kunst UND Technology.
Radio podcast by Finiscore.
Film Explore.